First of all, growing a wellness business is really, really hard. And it's very similar almost to how hard it is to take care of yourself. I think a lot of people want to take care of themselves, but it's very hard. When somebody starts to work out, they're more likely to take care of their mental health, or they start to take a supplement, they're more likely to eat well or wear a wearable, whatever it might be. And it's just going to become a snowball. And we've already seen it obviously a lot.
What were the lessons? What were these decisive moments like for you in your career, and how have they shaped the way you look at your current endeavors?
When it came to shutting down my first company, it was really hard, man. And so when I had to make that decision, I really had to take some reflection time to say, well, I'm so proud that I took the chance, and I'm so proud of the doors that are now open because of this. And I think for people out there, it's about realizing that the risks that they can take, if they can, are not necessarily about the specific result that you want for that instance. It's about being seen as someone who takes risks, as being seen as someone who can make shit happen.
What can we learn from athletes approaching maybe our own careers?
We do such a disservice to young people by setting them up, as I said before, to not be able to really think for themselves and not to think critically about what they want. And for the record, I'm not one of those people who says like everybody has to follow their dream and follow their passion. What it is all about, though, is understanding what's important to you and finding your way to build your own actual day-to-day life. The reality is it's less about the mission and more about who you interact with on a day-to-day. Who are the people that you're going to work with?
Today we're joined by Brian von Ancken, a former attorney turned wellness founder and operator. Brian, he's the founder of the Wellness Growth Mastermind and has worked with and also scaled brands or wellness brands like Berries, Othership, and Tough Mudder. His work really sits at the intersection of growth, community, and also the health and wellness space, which I've covered a lot in the past. And it's great having you on the pod, Brian. And maybe before talking about what is driving you right now and what you're building, it would be lovely if you could share a couple of words about your background and how it brought you to the place where you are right now.
Sure. No, it's great to be here, and thanks for having me. Yeah, I think I'd like to give the background, but I also just want to start by sharing a few truths that I see about the health and wellness space in general. First of all, growing a wellness business is really, really hard. And it's very similar almost to how hard it is to take care of yourself. I think a lot of people want to take care of themselves, but it's very hard. But when you think about growing a wellness business, there's so many headwinds when it comes to behavior change, sick care system, discretionary income, all these different things that make it really, really challenging to grow something that is ultimately good for people. And so I'm somebody who's really motivated by the fact that just because it's hard doesn't mean that it can't be done. And I also believe strongly that this is an all boats rise industry. I believe that when somebody starts to work out, they're more likely to take care of their mental health, or they start to take a supplement, they're more likely to eat well or wear a wearable, whatever it might be. And ultimately, what we're doing is every single company in this ecosystem is bringing people into the tent of health, because people, once they are in the tent of health, they start identifying as I'm a healthy person. And all of a sudden, all their decisions are filtered through that mindset. So when I travel, how do I travel in a healthy way? When I eat, when I interact, it gets very, very deep. And I think we all need to get to this critical mass where if we can get enough people to start thinking this way, it's just going to become a snowball. And we've already seen it obviously a lot. Anyway, I just get really fired up about that. So I want to just get the audience excited. I always think sometimes on these things, you hear the background and you're like, let me hit the skip button. And so I'll share my boring background, not so boring, but boring-ish background soon.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's amazing. I can totally relate with that. And maybe I should also rethink the way I start my podcast for sure. And I really like the notion that you've just mentioned. I mean, something that I've also noticed is this flywheel effect that people have in terms of their health, right? I mean, people start off wearing those wearables and then they start drinking less alcohol because they see what kind of impact that has to their performance, to their sleep scores and whatever that may be. So totally agree with you. I think a lot of things that we could touch base on throughout the podcast. But still, I'll be very, very curious to hear a bit about your background at least, because
No,
I
of course.
know,
Yeah.
yeah,
No, I'm happy to. I mean, who the heck am I? So at the end of the day, I'm somebody who I grew up, you could call it an all-American type of kid. Got good grades, went to a good school. I was captain of the football team and I played football in college and, was all about physical health. I like to say I lived the should life. So I was kind of doing what was expected of me. I went to law school not soon after graduating from college, got my law degree. I took the bar and I was going to go work for a big law firm. But then in my third year of law school, I interned for a company at the time called Tough Mudder, which was just like 10 people in a room. And they put on these crazy obstacle course events. They were kind of like alternatives to triathlons. They were like 30 obstacles, 13 miles, electric shocks, climbing over walls, all sorts of crazy things. And I was like, this is awesome. And I want to help them. And so came in as their first legal hire, ended up wearing a number of hats, but ended up helping them grow from, 10 of us in a room to a couple $100 million company pretty quick, learned a lot along the way, and then just kind of caught the bug of entrepreneurship. I started my first company soon after that, which was in the health and wellness space. It's called Anchor. It was a mindful social workout. So my whole hypothesis was there's all these aspects of health, but it's very, very hard for people to find time to check all the boxes, the mental side, the physical side, the social connection. And a lot of us end up just going to the gym and like we do the physical, but we forget about the rest. And so I created a workout that combined breath work, meditation, group sharing, and a HIIT style workout experience called Anchor. We had a really great momentum going in New York, a couple locations, and then COVID hit. We transferred online and I just had to, learn what it was like to build an online health community. And if I'm being honest, it was overwhelming. I started to do things like burn myself out. I was like becoming an oxymoron. I was promoting all this health and then I wasn't necessarily taking care of myself and all the different ways that you can grow a business in the health space, whether it's influencers, paid ads, podcasts, SEO, all this stuff became very overwhelming for me. And I felt like I wasn't able to keep up with all of it. And so I ended up, as I wound that company down, I said, I'm going to become an expert when it comes to growth. I'm going to become like the guy. And so I ended up taking a gig with Othership as like one of their first hires, doing partnerships and growth. And if people who don't know Othership, it's a sauna cold plunge experience in New York City as well as Toronto. They also have a breathwork app. And yeah, just kind of like hit the ground running with them and helped get the first 100,000 users on the breathwork app and then launched the first couple spaces. And as I was building that, I started to meet all of these really interesting people who were building other companies or leading growth. And selfishly, I was like, I met two really smart people and I was like, I would really love for you two to meet each other, but I want to listen to the conversation. So I created a mastermind group, which was just an opportunity for us to get together and share learnings. And this started a couple of years ago now. It was informal, but it started to grow and we started to add more people. And I really realized something when I got people together, which is that if you work in the health and wellness space, it's almost this filtering function of great people. Like when you meet another founder in the space, odds are they're inspiring, they're generous, they're kind, and that's not true everywhere. And like I said, when you couple that with the fact that it's an all boats rise industry, it just makes for some really exciting connections and conversations. And so, was it Othership? Got poached to go work at Barry's, was at Barry's leading partnerships for a while. And then when I became a dad about 2 years ago, I decided to wanted to become an entrepreneur again. And this community was growing. And I said, you know what, let's see if I can turn this into a thing. And sure enough, fast forward a year and a half, over 200 members, big name brands like Aura, 8 Sleep, Peloton, Headspace are represented in the group, but we have a lot of up and coming brands too. And it's great. We just get together and we support each other virtually, in person, on Slack. And it feels really right where I'm supposed to be right now.
It's amazing. Brian, I think one thing I could resonate with quite well, I already told you before. I started off this podcast about the business of health and wellness. Currently, I'm moving a bit more also into the career aspect. And you also mentioned earlier that everything is wellness in a sense, but we could talk about that later. I mean, there's wellness real estate, there's wellness hospitality. If we really think that vision through, everything could be wellness and should be adapted to your health, right? Essentially, but that's something we could touch base on later. And I can totally agree with the aspect. Talking to founders, they all have this great founder market fit. Oftentimes they have great, oftentimes a personal trigger why they are doing the things they're doing. And they seem to be very nice people. which is quite impressive, founders in that space. Maybe one question regarding your career very quickly. You mentioned you wanted to become an attorney and a lawyer, essentially. And you had those two, it seems like two pivotal, decisive moments in your career, right? One moment when you wanted to be an attorney and you decided not to go the classic route, I assume. And then also when you almost, or you burned out, right? Founding or building your first company. What were the lessons? What were these decisive moments like for you in your career, and how have they shaped the way you look at your current endeavors?
Yeah, so I don't know about anyone else, but it's very hard to stray from the should life when you're on it. I think we have a lot of sunk cost fallacy of like, I've gone this far, I've gotten the good grades, and how do I slightly deviate? And if I'm being honest, I mean, working at Tough Mudder as an attorney wasn't a full rejection of law. I mean, I practiced there for a long time, and I feel like I still very confidently say I practice law and I'm an attorney, but I was able to take the less known path. I think not because I was the only one willing to do it, but because I think I was very creative in how I went about opportunities for myself. I think a lot of people on the should life are, you go to business school and then you get the consulting interviews and you do them and it's kind of all done for you. But if you're proactive, so for example, for this Tough Mudder, I heard about it. I guessed the CEO's email address and I sent him an email being like, I think you could use a lawyer. I'm like 5 minutes away from your office. Let me come in and tell you why. And so I think that yes, there's aspects of it where I had to have faith and I had to have trust and I had to be like brave, but also I had to create my own luck, which they don't teach you how to do in school, right? The test is you answer all the questions and you get the grade. The test isn't figure out your way to get the A. And so it makes sense that our minds are not built that way to do that. And I think, one of the things that I've been able to be taught couple different times in my career that is huge is just like, if you can add value, then you can open a lot of doors and you can add value in a lot of ways. You don't necessarily need money or expertise. If you have time, that's something that you can add. Or if you have creativity, you can add, like there's ways to add value. You could review someone's website. Like I think there's lots of ways that people can, even if they might seem like they don't have the ability, it's just about taking initiative and then taking some chances. And so that was my experience with Tough Mudder. When it came to shutting down my first company, it was really hard, man. It was I mean, I really don't recommend this for founders, but I think it happens to a lot of first-time founders where you feel like your company is your baby. And it's just like, it's so personal, it's so intertwined with who you are, and to have to, end that is a very challenging decision. But I actually think that's a really disservice to the company if you just have that mindset, because ultimately then you're not as open to responding to the market and listening to what customers say, or, understanding that things are going to be up and down. And so when I had to make that decision, I really had to realize, like, take some reflection time to say, well, I'm so proud that I took the chance. And I'm so proud of the doors that are now open because of this. Because if I hadn't taken the chance and if I hadn't done that, I would be in a completely different place than I am now. And I think for people out there, it's about realizing that the risks that they can take, if they can, are not necessarily about the specific result that you want for that instance. It's about being seen as someone who takes risks, as being seen as someone who can make shit happen. And if you can start to build that narrative for yourself, then you're a lot more doors open than they would be otherwise.
Interesting. And it also seems like your business, you just mentioned it, oftentimes you rely on macro trends, things that you cannot influence or have no power over. And it seems like, I mean, the pandemic came. And also it seems like timing wise, I'm not sure, maybe you could explain to the audience again what that first business was about. But it seems like nowadays that would have been, very much
Oh yeah,
different timing, right?
think a lot. I think a lot. If anyone out there wants to start Anchor 2.0, I would back it, because I think it's a great idea. Everyone who experienced it loved it. Everyone I talked to about it think it's a great idea. And I think you're right. Right now, it's even more relevant than it used to be. This is actually an anecdote I think about a lot. Basically, when I was at Tough Mudder, we had an obstacle called Arctic enema, which sounds like the scariest thing you've ever heard of in your life. It was just a cold plunge. All it was somebody jumping into a dumpster full of ice water, putting their head under, and then going to the other side. That was about 8 years ago. A cold plunge was called an Arctic enema. Now people do it for fun. They do it all. I mean, obviously, depending on the country, different people have been doing it for much, much longer. But I mean, culturally in the United States, I guess I'd say. But anyway, I like to think that that's a great example of how quickly culture can change in our perception of what is good, what is healthy, what is acceptable. And I think about that all the time because there's so many companies in my group that are building really interesting, cool new products, but there's an education gap. People don't understand why they need it. And so you have to be an education company to some degree, but if you trust that in 3 to 5 years, something as drastic as an Arctic enema to cold plunge can happen, then a lot more can happen as well.
Amazing. Great. And now you're at the moment you've built or you're building Wellness Growth Mastermind, your current venture, which is all about community and connecting those influential founders, executives from these companies. Maybe introduce us to what you're building, what the Wellness Growth Mastermind actually is for people who have never heard of it. What triggered you to build it? You already alluded to it, but maybe shortly outline that. And bring us along what you want to solve with your venture here.
Yeah. I mean, so I could have gone out and raised money and started another company. And I thought long and hard to myself. And I really thought that building a community in this space was actually the highest and best use. Because if I can make 200 health and wellness companies 5% better, that's the highest leverage point I have that can make the world a healthier place. Because I really, truly believe that if the world gets healthier, a lot of other problems start to almost take care of themselves. Like, I'm not going to say everything's going to be cured, but when people are starting to take ownership of their own health, take more responsibility, start thinking for the long term, I think things change a lot. So I see it as this root cause of a lot of like what's going wrong with the world. And so this is my best way to serve that mission. And so what the group is, though, is it is a group completely focused on how do you help a business grow? Because I think there's a lot of people in this space who have great hearts and they really want to build for the right reasons. But it's not going to work if you don't have a functioning company. It's not going to work if you don't have money in the bank. It doesn't matter how noble your cause is. And in order to grow these types of businesses, you have to be very savvy because it's a saturated market. There's a lot out there. And what's being savvy means is understanding the levers of growth. And that's going to be different for a B2B company than a D2C, and depending on wearables and high AOV products versus like there's lots of variables within that. But the reality is that if you have a space, which if you think about it, like most people just don't have a space. They maybe have one friend or two friends that they can ask for advice. But if you had a trusted space where you could truly ask a question and get a response on, a new creative marketing strategy you're trying or a channel or, has anybody got a connection to this podcast, whatever it might be, those are extremely valuable because I think I talk a lot about the group being somewhere between ChatGPT and LinkedIn, right? There's just questions that ChatGPT can't answer because it's not public. And if you ask certain questions on LinkedIn, it'd be weird because there's just too many people on there. So this is this kind of like in-between space where it's a more curated. I know everybody in the group. I like to say this about the group. Everybody in the group is three things. They're accomplished, kind, and generous. And if you put enough people like that together, good things happen. And so, yeah, the group is I'm not doing any outbound. Like I'm not this podcast. It's all just things that come to me and figuring out, are people doing it for the right reasons? They have a great background. Are they opening to have a giving mindset? And if so, I'm just trusting that, this is going to grow into something that is really needed because there's a lot of communities out there, I believe, that serve the fitness space. There's a lot of communities out there maybe that serve the mental health, but like nothing is really trying to bring everything together. And that's where the consumer is going. And so it makes sense for us all to talk together. So, I mean, there's lots and lots of places I could bring this, but from my first experience, I just know I got to focus on, let's just get to these goals and try to just every day add value to members every day, organically meet new people and try to just trust that everything will take care of itself if you just show up every day and do the right thing.
It's interesting, especially what you mentioned earlier about, I mean, we just talked about it, founders in that space, they may have a noble cause, good intentions, and but you need to make sure that you scale a company, right? At the end of the day, right? And you get customers and all these kind of things and build something, grow something. It's very interesting because I was also reflecting myself on, let's say, how do you actually maybe even engage people? I'm thinking about my business school, engage people who are, on the track to go do the ordinary things? How do you engage them and maybe excite them for other things, which, could be maybe closer to their heart without sounding goofy or esoteric, right? But give them like really tangible things or real alternatives. It seems like you're trying to figure that out in the health and wellness space.
Well, I think that what you're getting at is so important. I think that there's so many people who are already health conscious, who know people that would benefit so much from starting to think a little bit differently about health, wellness, mental health, whatever it might be. And I think that the reality of the human species is that if somebody should you or tells you you should do something, pretty much most people will be like, I'm not doing that. I'm going to do the exact opposite. And, sadly, everybody kind of has to come to this place on their own timing. And that's just the reality of the health and wellness space. But you'd be surprised how much you can inspire people by modeling for yourself and making sure that the way in which you talk about things is not high and mighty, is not too woo woo, and if I'm being honest, not too scientific. I think that that's a little bit strange to hear, but I think that the things that turn off most people when it comes to health and wellness is it's too woo woo. I'm not that type of person. You're weird. And then the other one is it's too scientific. It's too I'm bored. I can't read the papers. I don't have time to do all this. So how do we create experiences? How do we create companies? How do we create products that are fun, that are accessible, that are matter of fact, that, another thing that's important is every person is going to have a different entry point. Some people, it's going to be meditation. Some people, it's going to be working out. Some people, it's going to be a wearable. Some people, it's going to be a podcast they listen to. And it's just making sure that those people that need it most are it's in their consciousness. And it's like when people buy a product, right? You need to see it 8 times. I think that's true for a lot of these people too, is like they just need to have a thought about, oh yeah, I saw it's really interesting to see how Tobi's starting to think about his mindset. Interesting. And then 3 months later, they might see something else that's about, a mindset coach or, the mental benefits of an aura ring. And it's just playing the long game with people and not being too preachy, not being too woo-woo, and not boring them, being over scientific, and most importantly, not shoulding them. Because if you're high and mighty, people are going to want to do the opposite.
Amazing. Maybe one more question also related to how your community is working. So you have a community, you have members. Do you have in real life experience? What do you do to engage the community? What do you offer? How would, if I was a community member or a prospective community member, how would sort of my experience look like if I was engaging with your community?
Yeah, so you talk to somebody on our team and we kind of apply, and then if you're accepted, then I'd get on a one-on-one conversation with you. We talk all about your business. We'd all talk all about what's top of mind. We talk all about how you can give back to the community, and then you'd come and be engaged. Probably you'd be put in a cohort. We're starting to do these cohorts. We have a 35-person cohort starting tomorrow. And it's going to be incredible. There's founders, there's growth leaders, there's investors from, lots of big name brands and lots of smaller name brands. And, you would just have this inherent class, like in business school, that you'd be connected to all these people. I'll assign you a roommate. I'm really leaning into this, and you'd have somebody who had your back, and there'd be a move-in day where we all post our intros on Slack and stuff. But the brass tacks of the group is really, there's monthly virtual meetings, and these are attended by roughly 50 to 60 people. We have an expert speaker talk for about 10 minutes, and then we do breakout rooms, which I pre-make, where I put you in a group with somebody I think that you might want to meet. And then we do a little mastermind session at the end. And it's an hour, but it feels like a conference where it's just like high energy. You get a lot of value out of it. I run it really efficiently. Then we do quarterly in-person events. Right now, those events are, about 50 to 75 people as well. They're in New York, LA, SF, Miami, trying to come to Europe, maybe London in probably next year. And then we have a Slack community for the day-to-day where, like I said, it's somewhere between ChatGPT and LinkedIn, and you can post questions and share. And so that's the main, but then there's so much more to it than that, but I don't kind of advertise it to, we go on hikes virtually. Some people get together and go hiking. We do sauna sessions. We create these like documents of all the influencers we're connected to share with different people, or podcasts that we've been on. So we can like have shared, kind of a shared brain of the community. So I'm just always trying to think of how do I add value to members, and that can take a lot of different forms.
Amazing. Brian, well, what do you say? So we just talked about the wellness space. Something I always asked actually all the founders when I was focused on wellness, I'm still close to it, I would say, is how do you define what you actually do? Because there's so many definitions out there, right? Health, wellness. I just talked recently to one of actually a German founder who's building in that space, and he referred to this article. I think it is from the Wellness Institute, which is talking about the $6 trillion industry, and everything is essentially wellness, right? There's real estate wellness, there's hospitality wellness. And if we think that through, we were talking about this flywheel effect, right? You change one behavior, you change other behaviors. It's easier to change other behaviors. People start going to raves. I mean, you worked at Othership, right? They do sauna raves. I know
Yeah,
them.
yeah, yeah.
We have one in Zurich, which they're doing something very similar. They're doing raves there. And there's a small group of people actually really changing their lifestyles. Um, what is it? Where are you operating at? How do you call the industry? Is it health? Is it wellness? Is it both? And maybe give us some more context about what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say certain people get very animated about this topic. I'm not one of them. I think you're right. Every business is going to be a health, wellness business in some way. The way that I have looked at my group, I mean, I didn't know my group was going to be a thing. I called it the Wellness Growth Mastermind. I didn't put a lot of thought into like, who's in, who's out. But ultimately, how I think about the space right now is I say, if you're in traditional healthcare, if you're within the payer system, if you're kind of at hospitals, most likely, if you're in that space, the group is less for you. That's not to say that there aren't exceptions to that, but we're mostly dealing with people who are in the health and wellness space, dealing with discretionary income, trying to get people to purchase, or companies, and then I think the fringes of it, like, it's kind of a judgment call, right? I personally right now I'm not getting into like pet wellness, and not too much in there's different lines that I'm putting in the sand, but for example, the hospitality space and real estate space, I love that space. I mean, we've got people from Hyatt, we've got people from up boutique hotels, and like it is a space that I think is a really important part of the ecosystem. And so ultimately, the way I look at it is more of a judgment call on like who's the founder, why are they building, what are they building, and then I could kind of make a judgment call on the fly on that.
And what's currently, from your view, what excites you most about that circle of people or that industry? What is sort of trends? What are trends that excite you particularly right now? What are you seeing?
Yeah, so I mean, I think we're seeing a huge amount of data being given to consumers, which I think is great. And I think it's a great step to have your Aura Ring to get your function health or superpower blood work done, and to have reams and reams of data. And now OpenAI has a health chatbot that can help you synthesize this data. And so I'm very excited about everybody having their own data. But what really excites me is the companies that are going to be able to take that data and help you lead to behavior change, because that's always been the crux of this space. How do you actually help another human change? And it's hard. Everybody knows you're supposed to get more sleep and eat better and work out. It's not rocket science, but getting people to actually do it, to do it in a way that's fun and accessible. I think that the companies that can harvest the data in order to lead to behavior change are the ones that excite me personally. Um, I'm also very excited about the hospitality space, as I said, and, basically creating a wellness traveler. I'm working on something now, trying to get New York City on board to, have like basically a wellness week where we would get all the hotels and wellness businesses together and celebrate New York being a healthy city and all the offerings that we have there. And so I think that's something that is very exciting, and there's a lot of untapped potential in. But there's a million things going on in terms of food as medicine and GLP-1s and peptides and biohacking and stuff like that. So I get more excited at just the macro trend that we are moving in a direction where more people are being health conscious. It doesn't bother me that creatine is polarizing, right? Like some people take creatine, or you take it too much, or protein. Like the fact that we're talking about it is great. And let's just keep moving the ball forward on being more intentional about taking care of ourselves and taking ownership of that fact, so that if we start doing that, who knows what happens in 5 7 years.
Amazing. Brian, we were talking about your career. We are talking about the space you're operating in, the wellness space. Something that excites me or that I'm interested in is also, I mean, there's a lot you can learn from athletes. And I feel like wellness brands are oftentimes starting off branding to athletes. I think Whoop was, very much an athlete thing. And now people all over the place are wearing those wearables, or other wearables. I don't want to name or highlight any particular brands here. What is your thought on, let's say, how wellness can even intersect with topics such as career, for instance? What can we learn from athletes approaching maybe our own careers? What are your thoughts here? Is there any maybe exciting brands who are working on any interesting solutions?
Yeah. Well, so I think that we do such a disservice to young people by setting them up, as I said before, to not be able to really think for themselves and not to think critically about what they want. It's very understandable that we as a society, especially I'm a parent now, and I understand wanting to encourage children to be safe and to take jobs that pay well so that they can then take care of themselves and future families. And I don't think that any of that is wrong, but I think that what's unfortunate is that mindset is not necessarily something that's focused on at all. Like none of this is taught at schools. Like you said, if you're an athlete, you have a goal, you probably have some sort of physical coach, you might have a mindset coach. You're somebody who's always believing in yourself and your ability to like make things happen. And I think that's where I get excited about what some of these companies can do. I mean, there's a couple companies in my group that are building, for college campuses where it's like helping you figure out, okay, how do I know what I want? And also, how do I know who I am? Because think about kids these days and just everybody who has time to figure out who they are and what they want. Like it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort. And I think making it easier for people, giving people permission. I think that's also where athletes come in is like athletes are ultimately who a lot of people might look up to, especially young men. And if athletes start to comment more on their mental health or kind of be cool with like, yeah, I meditate, I do sauna cold plunges, or journal, whatever it might be. Destigmatizing a lot of it is important for people. Um, but I can't say that there's ever going to be a perfect way for people to figure things out other than having trust in their own ability to make mistakes and to fail and to try new things. And then if that's present, you just have a much higher likelihood of being able to um, figure out what it is that you're actually want. And for the record, I'm not one of those people who says like everybody has to follow their dream and follow their passion. I think it is not all about that. What it is all about, though, is understanding what's important to you and finding your way to build your own actual day to day life. Like, I think a lot of people misconstrue, oh, I want to work at like this cool company and that's going to save everything. But the reality is it's less about the mission and more about who do you interact with on a day to day? Who are the people that you're going to like work with and what are they like? Are they kind? Are they generous? Do they do the things that you care about and make you feel seen and heard? And so it's kind of all about that. If you can do that, then I think if you can focus on those sorts of things, then you have a much higher likelihood of being in a position where you're feeling good about what you're doing.
Mm, mm. One thing I'm noticing, I'm not sure how it is in the US, but I would say in maybe certain, maybe intellectual circles in society, maybe I think in the US, you guys have a lot more admiration for athletes in a sense.
Yeah.
In Europe, if I reflect on it in Europe, I think there's still this thought or this idea that someone who is maybe a professional soccer player is maybe not as intellectually, you
Yes,
know,
definitely. Yeah.
someone. But I have the impression if you look at the players who are, for instance, soccer professionals nowadays, if you look at them, if you hear them in interviews, I'm not interacting with them, but if you maybe listen to a long-form interview of some of those players, you see that a lot of them, they sound pretty reflective. It's very, very interesting. And I think, I don't know, I mean, yes, it's probably similar, but it seems like these soccer clubs, they also really work on their athletes. They really support them also mentally. Um, And that's really, really impressive. I feel like it's something that could be utilized also maybe in other competitive fields. Young people who are wanting to, who want to maybe embark on an ambitious journey, professional journey. Why don't they have a sort of setup that resembles that in a sense? That's sort of something that.
Yeah, I mean, it's sad. Ultimately, the economics of a really successful soccer star make that investment worthwhile. And so, how do you get to the point where investing in a young person is, ultimately compound interest is like the most powerful, one of the most powerful forces in our universe. And there's a lot of reasons to invest in young people, but unfortunately, the return on investment is probably a little longer than a lot of people have the stomach for. And so I agree with you that it's needed. And I think the question is how do you get it funded? And then um how do you present it to them in a way that does not feel preachy or lame or whatever? I mean, one of the people in my group is called NOMO, I believe, which is like basically NOMO, they're helping college kids get off social media more, and they're rewarding them with wellness experiences. So it's kinda like you sign up and it's like you have a certain amount of screen time, and if you end up doing less screen time, you unlock benefits of like, hey, you're gonna get this wellness product or app or whatever. And it started by this Harvard professor who just like saw that this epidemic is happening, and but what he runs into is like, getting people to take action, convincing people and all this. It's a tough cohort, but it is so important to invest in. I'm so excited to support whoever or whatever is working in that cohort because it's really, really needed.
Maybe, I mean, you're interacting with a lot of founders and leaders in the wellness space, and I would be wondering maybe what are problems that seem to be very prevalent? I mean, the one you just mentioned. I mean, for instance, loneliness, right? Huge topic, totally underserved. What are problems that seem to be very prevalent, something that your community members are seeing? And maybe how are oftentimes your community members setting themselves up for athletic oriented careers? Because I probably have the impression, or I, I assume that a lot of your members also have athletic backgrounds or um, maybe have some sort of connection to it or a past. What do they do? What's your impression? What do they do to sort of have a resilient career? That's a big word that a lot of people are using right now.
Yeah.
Resilience seems to be the name
Yeah.
of the game.
I think that's a good way to put it, and yeah, I mean, I think the people in my group are, really good about taking care of themselves, playing the long game, making sure that they know that it's a marathon, not a sprint when you're building a company, and that there's gonna be your energy is almost one of the most important metrics of the company. If you feel burnt out, then the company will suffer immensely, and so some people have a coach, some people have a really established physical health practice. Some people are deep into meditation or breath work. But I think that the challenges that people face are that, like I said, it's just hard to grow these businesses. Like a lot of people have a hard time condensing what their business is into 5 words because that's where, these ads require you to be, or these, when someone talks about it, what is it? It's figuring out how to educate people on not only what it is, but why they need it, and then also selling them. And so those are 3 steps. Most people, if you're just trying to sell a piece of pizza, people know what it is, and you just have to sell it. And so there's a big challenge in the industry around educating people in a way that is, like I said, not too preachy, accessible, exciting, fun, and it's doable, but it's hard, and that's why things like getting on podcasts and doing long form interviews is a great medium for them. This is like I'm kind of practicing what I preach. I tell them I try to say get on one podcast a month. It's just get on it, get used to sharing your messages and get the word out there because this is a true you can have context, you can have nuance in podcasts, and you can actually win someone over as a customer or a fan or whatever it might be. And so I really believe in the form and the medium.
Do they really have difficulties to condense what they do essentially to their customers or also to themselves? Is it something they're struggling with? Is it because they're doing something entirely new oftentimes, or maybe
A lot of
creating new
times
categories, which are
exactly. They're doing
okay?
something completely new, right? I'm not talking about the fitness,
Yeah.
boutique fitness studios. I'm talking about there's this new lamp that just came out called OHM that is, a mindfulness lamp that responds to your mood and connects. And it's like does so much, but I can't condense it to like 5 words. Or there's a new shopping. experience app that allows you to shop via your dietary restrictions and integrates with all this stuff. And it's like, I think that it's not that they can't do it. It's more that, it's challenging to do it well, to do it really, really well, I think.
Makes a lot of sense. Brian, looking at the time, I'm sorry to say that we're time constrained. So maybe final questions here. Maybe for the audience, what's currently top of your mind right now, building your venture, or maybe with regards to the industry, or more broadly societal things that you would like to share with my audience here?
Yeah, I mean, I've got 2 kids under 2, so I'm thinking a lot about family. Thinking about the long term, and thinking about, just how do I do my part to take actions from a career perspective that teach my kids not to live out of fear. I'm really interested in trying to live from a place where fear isn't the main motivator in the decision making that I do. When I'm growing my business, fear can take a lot of forms, right? I can be scared to grow this thing really, really big because it's going to take up a lot of time and I won't be as present with my kids. Or I can be, too scared to take it big because I'm keeping it small. So I'm just wrestling with fear and trying to understand what the motivations are. But like I said, I think my biggest thing is how do I practice what I preach and don't become an oxymoron like I did with my last business where I'm burning myself out and not taking care of myself. And so it's figuring out how do you have it all? Is it possible to have it all? And what are the compromises that you need to make that are unique to me? Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. It was a very open question. Maybe one more question, because I'm sure you guys, or you interacting with a lot of interesting people actually. Was there someone with some sort of advice that really shaped the way you look at your career or at your life? Anything that was profound for you?
I mean, so many things.
Okay.
First of all, the realization that emotions are just bodily experiences, that was something that completely changed my mind, blew my mind, where an emotion is just like a sneeze or a fart or something, where it's something that you can experience and allow to like pass through you, and then you're kind of like good. And so having that relationship to emotions, like no one taught me what an emotion was growing up. I didn't know. And so being able to now identify an emotion, feel it in my body and let it go has been a really important practice of being more resilient and not being stuck in different emotions. There's
Amazing.
a million things, but that's one that sticks
I
out.
can imagine. Hey, Brian, I really appreciate your time. I'm very thankful for sharing your insights here, and yeah, all the best on your endeavors.
Thank you. Thanks for having me and good for you for doing this. And yeah, excited to stay in touch.
Thanks.